Welcome to this explainer. Before a single drop of blood pumps through your veins, a completely microscopic electrical symphony has to play out perfectly. Every single beat. Today, we're diving into the hidden electrophysiology that literally keeps us alive. And we're going to uncover exactly why and how cardiac cells actually trigger that life-sustaining contraction.
It's kind of wild when you stop and think about it, right? What actually tells your heart to beat? We don't have to consciously think about it at all, yet our heart muscles know exactly when to fire. Understanding how this built-in biological wiring initiates cardiac contraction is the whole foundation of modern electrocardiography. Okay, let's dive into this and figure out the exact mechanisms behind this phenomenal process.
The spark of life.
So we've got to start right at the source. If we want to understand why cardiac cells trigger contraction, we have to look at the cardiac pacemaker cells. These are located right up in the sinoatrial, or SA node. Think of these cells as a self-starting engine. They possess this amazing ability called spontaneous automaticity. Basically, that means they don't need a signal from your brain to tell them to fire. They just go ahead and generate their own electrical stimulus for each and every heartbeat, completely on their own. They are the ultimate origin point of the electrical spark.
Now, what's really interesting about this is, when you see a patient hooked up to an ECG monitor in a hospital, you'd probably assume you're watching those exact pacemaker cells firing, right? Actually, scratch that. You aren't. An ECG uses those little metallic patches on the body to detect instantaneous differences in electrical potential. But here's the catch. It only actually records the depolarization, the stimulation, and the repolarization, the recovery, of the working heart muscle, the atrial and ventricular myocardium. It totally misses the electrical activity of the pacemaker cells or the specialized conduction tissue itself. Why? Because that initial spark is just too incredibly small to be picked up by the electrode sitting all the way out on the skin. So, that begs the question, if the SA node creates the spark, how does it travel to create a big, unified pump?
Section 2. The heart's electrical highway. Well, that brings us to the specialized conduction tissue. The electrical signal doesn't just spread around randomly. It follows a highly specific anatomical path. It's like a microscopic highway ensuring a perfectly coordinated squeeze. It happens in 4 precise steps. First, the spark starts in the SA node and spreads across the right and left atria, making those top chambers contract. Then, the signal travels down to the AV junction, zips through the bundle branches and Purkinje fibers, and finally, it spreads all the way through the ventricles. Let's break down those critical middle steps.
Okay, so when the electrical impulse leaves the atria, it hits the atrioventricular or AV junction. This is made up of the AV node and the His bundle area. Think of this junction like a crucial toll booth on our electrical highway. It intentionally forces a physiologic delay. If the electricity just rushed straight through, the top and bottom chambers of a heart would squeeze at the exact same time, which would be a disaster. By delaying the signal, the AV node gives the ventricles precious milliseconds to completely fill with blood before they're commanded to pump. It is absolutely a masterclass in biological timing.
Let's move on and see how this builds once it gets past that toll booth. After the AV node, the His bundle dramatically bifurcates or splits into the right and left bundle branches. The left branch even divides further into anterior and posterior fascicular subdivisions. This rapid branching accelerates the signal, shooting it straight into the Purkinje fibers. These microscopic fibers act like a massive distribution network, delivering the electrical impulse deep into the ventricular myocardium, which is the thick, working muscle of the lower heart.
And that brings us to the final step of the pathway. This answers exactly how the electrical signal finally commands the muscle to squeeze. The depolarization wavefronts spread outwardly through the ventricular wall. They move from the inside lining, the endocardium, to the outer lining, the epicardium. It's this specific outward-sweeping wave of electricity that forcefully triggers the ventricular contraction, pushing blood out to your lungs and the rest of your body.
Section 3. Mapping the heartbeat. Now, you might be wondering, how did doctors actually visualize this tiny cellular action on a monitor? Well, this brilliantly illustrates it. The surface ECG waveforms map perfectly to the action potential phases of a single myocardial fiber. Phase 0, which is the rapid upstroke of the cellular action potential, is directly tied to the famous QRS complex that represents ventricular depolarization. Phase 2, the plateau phase, maps perfectly to the flat isoelectric ST segment. And Phase 3, the active repolarization or reset phase, creates the T wave. It's literally translating cellular chemistry into a visual graph. Because the ECG is a direct map of that cellular chemistry, we can see exactly what happens when things go a bit wrong. Take phase 0, for example.
That rapid upstroke relies heavily on sodium ions rushing into the cells. If something impairs that influx of sodium, like a dangerous condition such as hyperkalemia or maybe a drug like flecainide, the depolarization actually takes longer. On the ECG monitor, this physically shows up as an increased, widened QRS duration. The electrical signal is literally struggling to push its way through the muscle.
And we can track issues with the later phases of the heartbeat too. If a patient is dealing with hypocalcemia or is taking a medication like amiodarone, it can prolong phase 2 or phase 3 of the action potential. Because those phases match up with the later parts of the heartbeat, stretching them out is going to visually increase the QT interval on the surface ECG. So by just looking at the width of these waves, medical professionals are essentially reading the chemical state of the heart cells in real time. How cool is that?
Section 4. Reading the electrical vectors.
Being able to read the ECG brings us to our final core concept in understanding the heart's electrophysiology. You have to remember, the electrical signal isn't just a generic little pulse. It's a sweeping wave of energy traveling through three-dimensional space inside your chest. Because these depolarization and repolarization wavefronts have both a very specific direction and a measurable magnitude, we represent them in physics and medicine as vectors. By analyzing these vectors, we aren't just seeing that the heart is beating, we're mapping the exact geometric path the electricity is taking. So the crucial point here is that these vectors essentially describe the overall mean orientation of the electrical activity. That makes them an absolutely indispensable diagnostic tool. By calculating these directional vectors, clinicians can pinpoint the mean electrical axis of a patient's heart. If that axis points in the wrong direction, it flags an axis deviation. Plus, if one of those electrical highways we talked about earlier gets blocked, like a bundle branch block, the vector shifts dramatically, revealing exactly where the structural abnormality is hiding inside the heart's anatomy.
We've seen how specialized pacemaker cells use spontaneous automaticity to trigger the spark of life, and how that exact signal cascades down a highly organized anatomical highway just to command a coordinated squeeze of the ventricles. It really is a masterpiece of biology. But all this intricate wiring leaves us with one pretty provocative question to think about. Your heart's electrical system has its own magnificent automatic spark, but with so many complex branches and delicate chemical balances at play, what exactly happens to the human body when that precise wiring goes off track? The amazing world of electrocardiography holds the answers, and I hope this explainer has sparked your curiosity to go learn even more. Keep learning and keep wondering about the incredible science happening inside you every single second.